Where there is sorrow, there is holy ground, to quote Oscar Wilde. Let's begin tiptoeing into that holy ground. The 5 gates of grief. The first gate, as Weller describes them, is the big one. Everything we love, we will lose. This is when we experience the loss of someone or something we love. And the list is endless. Partners, friends, family, pets, our health, jobs, relationships, faith, even ourselves or who we thought we were. Even when we expect it, death or loss still comes as a surprise and hits us in the gut. Here, I'd like to share another poem by Jan Richardson called Blessing When the World is Ending. And it begins with a verse from Mark 13. The sun will be darkened and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Blessing when the world is ending. Look, the world is always ending somewhere. Somewhere the sun has come crashing down. Somewhere it has gone completely dark. Somewhere it has ended with the gun, the knife, the fist. Somewhere it has ended with the slammed door, the shattered hope. Somewhere it has ended with the utter quiet that follows the news from the phone, the television, the hospital room. Somewhere it has ended with a tenderness that will break your heart. Weller's second gate is the places that have not known love. He describes these as places within us that have been wrapped in shame and banished to the darkest corners of ourselves. Whenever any portion of who we are is denied, we live in a condition of loss. But we are unable to truly grieve because we feel in our body that this piece of who we are is unworthy of grief. One example of this would be someone ashamed of their sexual orientation. And what also helped me to understand this gate better was reading The Fruits and Gifts of the Spirit by Thomas Keating. Keating corresponds the beatitude of those who mourn to the gift of knowledge. He writes that the spiritual gift of knowledge provides us perspective on the energy that we have placed behind our emotional programs for happiness. We see how our actions are motivated by our false selves, misguided attempts to fulfill our instinctual needs. With the gift of knowledge, we realize God's infinite compassion and love for every part of us, and we mourn over the damage that our false selves have done to ourselves and others. Next, the third gate is the sorrows of the world. This gate opens when we register the losses of the world around us. Many of us can identify with this gate in so many ways. Climate change, the pandemic, homelessness, violence, extinctions, natural disasters are just a few causes of some of our communal grief. Weller says it is essential that we stop and recognize these losses. Our suffering is mutually entangled, as is our healing. We become acutely aware that there is no out there. We have one shared skin. The fourth gate is what we expected and did not receive. Weller writes that at the core of this grief is our longing to belong. It is not a reflection of personal failure, but the reflection of a society that has failed to offer us what we were designed to expect. This brings us back to childhood experiences of trauma that formed our emotional programs for happiness. Without people around a child to confirm their value and belonging, they often come away with the conclusion that they deserved or caused this treatment. The unconscious disappointment that lingers from the failure to receive this necessary support can slowly evolve into a sense of emptiness and anxiety, leading to the full force of harmful behaviors by our false selves. But most importantly, this is also a place where the Spirit gifts us with the knowledge that God is the true source of our happiness and worth, and with the experience of God as intimate and always present. Weller's fifth gate is ancestral grief. Grief we carry in our bodies from sorrows experienced by our ancestors. This includes undigested grief in our own family histories and grief that remains in our collective soul for the abuses of millions of people throughout history. He describes this ancestral grief as generating a persistent hum of sorrow in the background of our lives. He also reflects that in our obsession with progress and our addiction to the new, we no longer look to our ancestors as connection to things like the land, rituals, and stories, or as a link to the other side of life. Ancestral grief is hard to reconcile, but we can acknowledge it and hold it together with our faith in God's eternal grace. Now we will have about 10 minutes for reflection or journaling or self-care. And we'll leave the descriptions of the 5 gates of grief on the screen, and then the bells will signal our time to return. And when the bells ring, there'll be a little video poem from Richard Rohr's Center for Action and Contemplation. So right now, just about 10 minutes. And Linda, do you want to put on the screen again, the 5 gates of grief?
I'll do it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mary. So the second half of this morning, I will look at I will look at the second half of the Beatitude. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. And I just I'm exploring a few ways we can be comforted in our grief. So being Christian contemplatives, it's natural to turn to our faith and our practice in grief. In Richard Rohr's daily meditations, he shared a beautiful and heartbreaking writings of Mirabai Starr, who lost her 14-year-old daughter Jenny in a car accident. And this is what she wrote. Suddenly, the sacred fire I've been chasing all my life engulfed me. I was plunged into the abyss, instantaneously dropped into the vast stillness and pulsing silence at which my favorite mystics hint. So this was the profound suchness I had been searching for during all those years of contemplative practice. This was the holy longing that saints had been talking about. This was the sacred emptiness, and I hated it. I didn't want vastness of being. I wanted my baby back. But I discovered there was nowhere to hide when radical sorrow unraveled the fabric of my life. I could rage against the terrible unknown, and I did. Or I could turn toward the cup, bow toward the cupbearer, and say yes. With reticence at first, and then with mounting courage, I dared to mourn my child. From the very beginning, I suspected that something holy was happening, and that if I were to push it away, I would regret it for the rest of my life. There was a sense of urgency, as if turning from death meant turning from my child. I wanted to offer Jenny the gift of my commitment to accompany her on her journey away from me, even if to do so simply meant dedicating my heartbeat and breath to her and paying attention. And so I showed up. When a feeling I did not think I could survive would threaten to engulf me, I practiced turning toward it with the arms of my soul outstretched. And then my heart would unclench a little and make space for the pain. Years of contemplative practice had taught me just enough to know better than to believe everything I think. How to shift from regretting the past and fearing the future to abiding to what is. In this case, a totally messed up thing, the ultimate messed up thing, and I sat with that. I did not engage in this practice to prove something to myself or anyone else. I was not interested in flexing my spiritual muscles. I did it for Jenny. My willingness to stay present through this process was an act of devotion. By leaning into the horror and yielding to the sorrow, by standing in the fire of emptiness and saying yes to the mystery, I was honoring my child and expressing my ongoing love for her. She continues, even as we cry out in the anguish of loss, the boundless love of the Holy One comes pouring into the shattered container of our hearts. This replenishing of our emptiness is a mystery. It is grace and is built into the human condition. Few among us would ever opt for the narrow gate of grief, even if it were guaranteed to lead us to God. But if our most profound losses, the death of a loved one, the ending of a marriage or career, catastrophic disease, or alienation from community, if they bring us to our knees before that threshold, we might as well enter. The beloved might be waiting in the next room. Richard Rohr adds, the enfleshment and suffering of Jesus reveals that God is not apart from the trials of humanity. God is not aloof. God is not a spectator. God is not merely tolerating human suffering or instantly just healing it. God is participating with us, living alongside us and with us. That is what gives us eternal purpose and hope. In Jesus, God comes along to show us, even I suffer. Even I participate in the finiteness of this world. Through encountering the living God in our pain, we can experience another kind of life, another kind of freedom. And right now, I'd like to share a video of James Finley speaking about grief, the trustworthiness of death in the loss of his wife.
So then if this is our wisdom in these times, and if this is our practice that grounds us in the wisdom, that sustains us through these times, then in the light of this wisdom and in the light of this practice, then what light does it shed on the nature of death? Specifically, what is it that makes death trustworthy? I'd like to begin first, again, at a psychological level, first, with this kind of classical work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in The Stages of Dying. And she said what she found in working with many dying people over the years is that when a person enters into the process of dying, some terminal process, you go through these stages, beginning first with denial. I can't believe it's true. To thee, but never to me, she says. And then there is an anger over the loss. And then you try to strike a bargain that if you spare me or spare the beloved, I'll do this and this and this and this. When the bargaining doesn't work, we go into depression. And out of the depression, we can come to acceptance. Not everyone comes to acceptance. So my first insight is that the first 4 stages of dying refer to the ego. It's a very natural process of our consciousness of ourselves in our egohood, realizing that it's falling asunder, like it's ceasing to be. But if we ride that out, we come to acceptance. And she says to be in the process of acceptance, as someone who's come to acceptance, she says they're not happy. She said, but they pass beyond the dualism of happiness and sadness. And I would put it this way, to gaze into the face of the dying loved one, you get a sense that you're looking into the gate of heaven. You get a sense of the deathless beauty of the beloved, Gabriel Marcel. We know we've learned to love someone when we've seen in them that which is too beautiful to die. And so the beloved who's dying is bearing witness to our heart, to the deathless beauty of the beloved as they pass away into the mystery of death, that leaves their deathless beauty present, fully present, but hidden in the midst of the world, in the midst of our life, in the midst of God. And here I'm sharing to my own. See, I think because death is always personal. It's one thing to think about it as a fact, but it's personal. It's our death or the death of the loved one. And when my beloved wife, Maureen, who just died recently, I keep on the mantle here in our living room our wedding vows we did 30 years ago. These are our wedding vows. I, James Finley, take you, Maureen Fox, from this day forward to love, cherish, and care for till death do us part. I vow to you my honesty and vulnerability day by day, walking our walk into all our unknown tomorrows. I know that to grow, I must continue dying. And as you I choose to live and die with, head to head, toe to toe, soul to soul, this day and forever. This day I vow to accept this call. And I realized as I'm in the midst of this breathing process, I couldn't stand the pain of saying to her, I loved you so much. I realized it's much softer and truer to say, not that I loved you so much, but that I love you so much, that your dying has not stopped me from loving you. And I also know that in dying you were not annihilated but consummated. In your last breath, you crossed over in the oceanic oneness of the love of God, beyond the edges of the universe, yet closer to me than I am to myself. I also know that in our years together, we knew that we were in the body together. We recognized this deathless beauty in each other, the deathless beauty of God and our love for each other. So Saint Miktel the Magner, she prayed to God. God said to her in prayer, do not fear your death, for when that moment comes, I will breathe in my breath, and your soul will come to me like a needle to a magnet. And therefore, death is trustworthy, because the heart, born of love, has glimpsed the deathless beauty of ourselves, grounded in the deathless love of God. St. Thomas Merton has a lovely little prayer to God. It says, you who sleep in my breast are not met with words, but in wisdom within wisdom, within dispossession within dispossession. That is, we are dispossessed by death of the beloved. We are dispossessed. And in that deep dispossession, we fall down into this enrichment of a deathless beauty that cannot be explained or calculated. And as a final thought, I really wonder if we look at our life in this way, if they're not dress rehearsals for death. For look how often in life we find ourselves caught up in a hardened habit of our heart, often formed of trauma and abandonment, habits of addiction, habits of resentment, habits of anger, habits of fear, habits of intimacy avoidance, habits of this kind of litany. And we realize that in order to be free, we have to die to those habits, but we're bonded to what traumatizes us. But with love and with courage and with grace, as we work through, we fall into this enriched plenitude in which we're born out of that death that we never would have experienced had we not gone through that. And we go through life over and over and over and over again, so that our death is kind of the grand finale of the ultimate victory of love over all forms of suffering and death. And I think it's this that makes death trustworthy. It's for us as Christians, it's Jesus' death on the cross, the words of the thief who's being crucified with him. Remember me when you come into your kingdom. This day you'll be with me in paradise. And so everything perishes in death. And the falling away of death shines forth the deathless love that never dies in our heart. And that's what makes our death trustworthy.
I just wanted to let you know that that link to the video is pretty dense. It's beautiful, but if you want to revisit that, it will be on the resource page as well. So moving on to another comfort in grief, one important one is community. In her book, It's Okay That You're Not Okay, therapist Megan Devine writes, grief can be incredibly lonely. Even when people show up and love you as best they can, they aren't really with you in this. They can't be. It so very much sucks that in a large part, you are alone in this. And also, you cannot do this alone. Buddhist teacher Kuang Lu encourages us. The world needs your suffering, your courage, and your strength. Don't try to kill your pain. Share it with another. Communicate it. If the first person you talk to isn't the right one, find someone else. Somebody wants to listen to your pain, to connect with you and understand you. When you find them, when you lighten your burden and discover the jewels and joy that are alive beneath the pain, later you will be present for others who are suffering. Francis Weller, who wrote The Wild Edge of Sorrow and gave us the 5 gateways, leads community grief rituals and notes that healing is a matter in a great part of having our connection to the community and the cosmos restored. This truth has been acknowledged in many studies. Our immune response is strengthened when we feel our connection with community. By regularly renewing the bonds of belonging, we support our ability to remain healthy and whole. And Megan Devine again shares much good advice on what support looks like. The reality of grief is far different from what others see on the outside. You don't need solutions. You don't need to move on from your grief. You need someone to see your grief and acknowledge it. You need someone to hold your hands while you stand there in blinking horror, staring at the hole that was your life. Some things cannot be fixed. They can only be carried. And one way to let others know around you that you're in need of support is tears and crying. From the time you were a baby, one of crying's functions was to obtain comfort and care from others. So tears are a gift of grace from God, and their fruit is always joy. There's much research that supports the importance of crying emotional tears as a comfort and even health benefit. Stress hormones and toxins are found in measurable amounts in emotional tears. You're literally flushing them from your body. Crying may also be one of the best mechanisms to self-soothe. Crying activates the parasympathetic nervous system that helps your body rest and digest. Another example of self-soothing crying is that it releases endorphins, which can give you a sense of calm or well-being. Another comforting gift that has helped me in my grief is nature and creation. I remember when my brother died and I was having a hard time sleeping. I got up to watch the sunrise from my patio. And it was so beautiful and expansive that I could feel it holding my grief. It always touches me that as much harm that has been done to the earth, it still produces so much beauty, even in the midst of all that violence and lack of care. The earth produces beauty, from the small daffodil sprouting from the soil to the vast galaxy above. And that brings me hope. Music has been another comfort to me. At the time I was experiencing loss after loss, I got a lot of solace from listening to Christian radio, positive, encouraging K-Love. I don't listen too much now, and I hadn't before, but I found hope in the direct messages of praise. At the time, it filled a need and helped me through some difficult times. While I was preparing this retreat, my daughter told me about the solfeggio frequencies. And in my brief research, I found out that they're musical tones that resonate with our brainwaves and can have a healing effect on our minds and bodies. The solfeggio frequencies were the fundamental sounds used in composing Gregorian chant and ancient Sanskrit chants. The music that I've been using this morning are those composed with solfeggio frequencies, particularly 432 hertz, which is said to slow the heart rate and fill the mind with feelings of peace and well-being, and 396 hertz, which is said to help eliminate feelings of guilt and help us feel uplifted and secure. So there are numerous other ways to find comfort in grief, of course, like journaling, art, movement, diet, sleep, to name a few, pets. And one last comfort I'll share from Megan Devine's book is breathing, just simple breathing, and specifically exhaling longer than you inhale. Neurobiological and trauma studies have shown that modifying your breathing helps soothe your nervous system and the fight or flight response. And it doesn't even have to be a deep breath, just exhale a moment longer than you inhale. And my pattern is I breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 1, and then breathe out for 6 counts. And you can follow your own counting. And usually it helps if I breathe in through my nose and exhale through my mouth. So let's just practice a little bit of extending our exhale. And you can do it to my count or whatever feels right to you. But we inhale through our nose, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold and exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, through our nose, we inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold and then exhale through our mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I thought we would do a little short breathing meditation to another Gregorian chant. And the music is Hymn to St. John the Baptist in the 8th century. Apparently one of the most perfectly created pieces of music. So I like to put my hand on one hand on my heart, one hand on my stomach, and then just breathe. Breathe in, hold, breathe out. And as Mary plays the music, we just breathe in and out, holding ourselves. It lasts about 7 minutes. blessing that holds a nest in its branches. The emptiness that you have been holding for such a long season now. The ache in your chest that goes with you night and day, in your sleeping, your rising. Think of this not as a mere hollow, the void left from the life that has leached out of you. Think of it like this, as a space being prepared for the seed. Think of it as your earth that dreams of the branches the seed contains. Think of it as your heart making ready to welcome the nest its branches will hold. So that is all I've prepared for this morning, and I appreciate you being here. We will stop the recording, and if anybody has any comments or anything they'd like to share, you just raise your hand. And I feel a little like I grew up in Southern California, and I don't know if you know Hobo Kelly, she was like, oh, I see Winnie there, and I see. So if you want to raise your hand, if you have something to say, then feel free, and we will stop the recording as well. I'll try to get to the screens that I can here.